So, Fantastic Four First Steps has only grossed $11.7 million in its second Friday on the big screen, making a 80% drop from its debut, making this movie officially a financial flop year.
Fantastic Four First Steps crashes again at the box office in its third weekend. And keep in mind, this is after Bob Iger, just like he did for Thunderbolts when he talked about, oh my gosh, we're so happy with the success of Thunderbolts, blah, blah, blah. This is after Bob Iger does Damage Control, basically lies to everybody and talks about what a successful start to a franchise, a new franchise in the MCU that this is.
Brand Marvel used to sell tickets in and of itself. It almost didn't matter what the movie was. People were interested because they were so bought into the MCU. And in particular, late into phase 3, it was just, people trusted they were going to get a good movie. Or
Disney boss Bob Iger says Marvel's Fantastic Four reboot has successfully launched this important franchise into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The reality is this is another box office loser for Disney.
Call me old school, but I believe the reason why these movies are flopping is because that nobody wants to see a standalone Marvel movie or an origin story, really. The Marvel Universe has been established. People want to see their favorite characters always interacting with each other.
The numbers are bleak for Disney Marvel's Fantastic Four. In fact, now that we have 3 weekends worth of data, this is a movie that is going to struggle to hit $500 million. I think it'll do it. I think it'll get there, probably just a little bit above, but it is not guaranteed. It is now going to be a struggle for this movie to get to $500 million.
What happens when Marvel's sure thing turns into its biggest risk in over a decade? You know the kind of risk I'm talking about. The one studios hide behind carefully worded press releases, glowing sound bites, and red carpet smiles, hoping no one notices the iceberg until after the ship has already sailed. Because on paper, Fantastic Four First Steps was supposed to be bulletproof. The return of Marvel's first family, a $200 million budget dripping with cutting-edge effects, a cast stacked with A-list names, and a marketing campaign so loud you could probably hear it from the moon. And for one weekend, just one, it looked like the bet might pay off. A $116 million domestic debut. The headlines were already written. Marvel's back. The MCU Strikes Again. Bob Iger delivers. But the truth? That victory lasted less than the time it takes to binge watch one of their Disney Plus shows.
It's like we see with every single Marvel movie released. The big lead up, the excitement, the hype that the mainstream media desperately tries to generate. Then the early access screenings come out and they tell you it's the best thing ever. Then the reviews come out. Then the opening weekend happens. And even when the opening weekend is weak, like it was with Fantastic Four First Steps, they tell you, oh my gosh, everybody, Marvel's back, watch out.
Because by the second weekend, this so-called crown jewel had already started crumbling, and by the third, it was in freefall. The kind of box office collapse you can't spin with optimistic interviews. The kind that makes investors nervous and sparks emergency meetings at the studio. And here's the part that should make every Marvel fan and every Marvel executive very, very uncomfortable. This wasn't just a one-off. Fantastic Four wasn't a freak accident. It was a symptom of something bigger. Something that's been quietly eating away at the MCU for years.
And it always ends up happening this way, where the second weekend falls off a cliff, and that is what we saw for Fantastic Four. But would it rebound in its third weekend? Well, of course it didn't.
We're not just talking about one film's bad luck. We're talking about the formula itself, the same blueprint that built a billion-dollar empire, starting to fall apart right in front of us. And if Marvel doesn't fix it, and fast, the road to Avengers Doomsday could end up being less of a victory lap and more of a funeral march.
Like, Fantastic Four is a good movie, but it's nowhere near as fun as Jurassic World and Superman. So I don't know if families, like if kids like Superman or Jurassic World more, maybe that's it. I'm kind of trying to think of a reason, because the reviews are great. People are giving it high praise online. I personally like Superman better, but I mean, I like Fantastic Four. So yeah, I'm surprised they had that much of a dip. Like 65% is pretty, that's substantial.
So here's the piece from Deadline magazine. Fantastic Four First Steps, $40 million second frame. Just to remind you, it wasn't even a week ago that Deadline magazine was projecting a $48 million second weekend, a 60% drop from the first weekend. And then over the next few days after that, it became a 45 to 47 million.
So let's go back to where it all started. Not at the box office, not even in the filming, but in the promise. Because before the movie ever hit theaters, before a single review dropped, Marvel had already set the stage for a win so big, failure didn't even seem possible. Or at least, that's what they wanted you to believe. The Fantastic Four isn't just another Marvel team. In comic book history, they're royalty, the very foundation of Marvel's modern superhero era. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's original creation, the spark that helped define an entire universe of heroes. So when Marvel Studios finally got their hands back on the rights, the hype was automatic. Fans had been waiting over a decade to see Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm brought into the MCU properly. No awkward half reboots, no studio interference, just pure, unfiltered Marvel magic. The pitch was irresistible. This wasn't going to be just a movie, it was the launchpad for the next era of Marvel's interconnected megastory, the movie that would set up Avengers Doomsday, the supposed climax of Marvel's next-generation saga. And the marketing? Oh, they went all in. Early critic screenings leaked glowing reactions. Words like triumphant, bold, and historic started showing up in trade magazines. Entertainment outlets ran exclusive behind-the-scenes features, carefully curated, of course, showing cast members laughing on set, epic action sequences being filmed, and directors giving passionate speeches about how much this story meant to them. Marvel dropped mystery teasers months in advance, each one packed with Easter eggs for hardcore fans to dissect. Cast interviews hinted at shocking cameos and game-changing connections to the wider MCU, just enough to start speculation without confirming anything. And social media? Completely saturated. You couldn't open TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter without seeing clips, posters, or Pedro Pascal's face. And Marvel made sure of that. Every trailer drop was an event. Hashtags trended within minutes. YouTube breakdown videos racked up millions of views before the movie even released. The message was clear. This is not just a reboot. This is history in the making. And to be fair, Marvel's hype machine has worked like a charm for over a decade. They know how to make a movie feel like a cultural event. They know how to make you feel like you're missing out if you don't buy a ticket opening weekend. But here's the thing. Hype is easy. Hype is controllable. Hype is manufactured. Holding an audience? That's something else entirely. And in the case of Fantastic Four, first steps, the second the opening weekend numbers came in, the cracks in Marvel's sure thing started to show. On paper, $116 million domestic in the opening weekend sounds like a win. In fact, it's more than a win. It's a headline grabber, enough to make Marvel execs smile for the cameras and tell interviewers the fans have spoken. But here's what most people don't realize. Opening weekends are the easiest part of the game. They're powered almost entirely by pre-release hype, advanced ticket sales, and the hardcore fans who would show up no matter what. The real test comes in the weeks that follow. And for Fantastic Four, that test was a disaster. Weekend 2, a 67% drop. That's not just a dip, that's a collapse. For context, even Marvel's weakest films usually drop somewhere in the mid-50% range. Anything above 60% is cause for concern. 67%? That's sirens blaring, scramble the boardroom kind of bad. In the industry, they call it falling off a cliff. You don't recover from that without a miracle. And the worst part? The drop wasn't a mystery. Fan reactions started trickling in right after opening weekend, and they weren't glowing. Yes, the visuals were praised. Yes, some performances got applause. But the overwhelming consensus was meh. Not terrible, not unwatchable, just not worth seeing twice. That's a life sentence for a blockbuster. Repeat viewership is what keeps momentum alive. It's what turns a big opening into a billion-dollar run. Without it, you get exactly what happened here. A second weekend collapse, followed by an even uglier third weekend. And the speed of that decline told a story all on its own. This wasn't a slow fade due to new competition or seasonal trends. This was a movie losing its audience in real time. People walked out, told their friends, and those friends decided to skip it. Even the PR spin couldn't hide it. Disney's talking points shifted almost overnight, from record-breaking launch to navigating a competitive box office. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't just a stumble. It was the first clear sign that Marvel's tried and true formula might not be so bulletproof anymore. If the second weekend was a cliff dive, the third weekend was, well, let's just say Marvel didn't just hit the rocks. They kept bouncing on the way down. By week 3, Fantastic Four. First Steps was pulling in just under $16 million domestically. That's a nearly 60% drop from the already weak second weekend. And at that point, the movie had scraped together around $434 million worldwide. Sounds like a lot of money, right? Hundreds of millions. But here's the hard truth. In blockbuster math, that number is dangerously low. See, here's something Marvel doesn't put in the marketing posters. When your production budget is north of $200 million, and your marketing push is easily another $100 million, and that's the official number, meaning it could be more, you're not just aiming to break even, you're aiming for the $600 million mark just to break even, and that's before you even think about profit. And that's being generous. Theaters take a cut. International markets often give back less than domestic sales. There are hidden distribution costs, back-end deals, promotional partnerships. All of that eats into what the studio actually pockets. So even if Fantastic Four limps past the $500 million mark, which isn't even guaranteed, it's still a loss compared to the expectations Marvel set. And here's where it gets worse. This wasn't wasn't supposed to be a one-off hit. This movie was the foundation for Marvel's next big crossover. It was the phase starter, the tone setter, the film that was meant to reignite the brand after a run of mid-tier performers. Instead, it joined the underperformers club almost immediately. You could feel the panic ripple through the fandom. Forums lit up. Analysts started posting charts comparing Fantastic Four to other MCU films. Not the good ones, the flops. You could see the downward trend in real time, and that kind of visual does more damage than any bad review. And for Marvel, this wasn't just about money, it was about momentum. The MCU was built on the idea that every movie would feed into the next, like an unstoppable machine. But when one gear slips, the whole system starts to shake. And with Fantastic Four, the gear didn't just slip, it nearly snapped off. Which leads to the question, when a movie this hyped can't hold its audience, who or what do you blame? Marvel had their answer ready, and in typical studio fashion, it wasn't them. When the numbers started looking ugly, the official line from Marvel and Disney was almost predictable. It's a competitive box office right now. On the surface, it sounded reasonable. After all, they argued, you had Weapons, a breakout horror hit, pulling strong numbers. You had Freak Your Friday hitting the teen demographic hard. And then there was Superman, still holding steady weeks after release. But here's the thing. When you actually break it down, those competitors don't hold water as an excuse. Take Weapons, completely different audience. Hardcore horror fans aren't skipping Reed Richards for jump scares. Those tickets aren't interchangeable. Then there's Freak Your Friday. Yes, it drew in crowds, but primarily a female teen audience that wasn't exactly in Marvel's core superhero lane to begin with. That crossover is minimal at best, which leaves the real competition, Superman. And that's where the problem becomes impossible to ignore. While Fantastic Four was hemorrhaging viewers, Superman was posting modest week-to-week drops and holding momentum. In other words, people were coming back. They were telling their friends to see it. It was building goodwill. Exactly the thing Marvel used to own. If you graph the numbers side by side, the picture gets even uglier. Fantastic Four's earnings flatlined almost immediately after opening weekend. No second wind, no late surge from positive buzz, just a slow, steady crawl toward mediocrity. And that's the part no amount of spin can hide. Because if competition were truly the issue, you'd see all movies in the same genre dropping at the same rate. But you didn't. The superhero audience was there. They just weren't choosing Marvel's movie. That's not competition, that's rejection. And here's why that matters. Studios can work around competition. They can adjust release dates, shift marketing, play the scheduling game. But rejection from your own core audience? That's a much deeper problem. It's the kind of issue that forces you to question the brand itself. For Marvel, that's a terrifying thought. Because if the built-in fan base starts tuning out, no amount of cameos, Easter eggs, or multiverse tricks will save you. And this wasn't just about Fantastic Four. This was about what came next. Because if the first family of Marvel couldn't hold their own, what did that mean for the next big thing? The answer? Nothing good. And the fallout was about to hit Marvel's biggest project yet, Avengers Doomsday. Marvel likes to act as if every film is its own separate win or loss. You'll hear them say, each project stands on its own. But that's not how the MCU works, and everyone knows it. This is a universe built like dominoes, each movie setting up the next. Knock one down too early, and the chain reaction can ruin the whole pattern. And right now, the dominoes aren't just falling, they're shattering on impact. Here's why Fantastic Four: First Steps mattered so much. It wasn't just another Marvel title. It was the foundation for Avengers Doomsday. Think of it as the Phase 1 Iron Man of this new era. You were supposed to meet these characters, get invested, and be hyped for how they'd fit into the grand crossover. But instead of walking out of theaters buzzing about Reed Richards' genius or Johnny Storm's big hero moment, people walked out talking about how they probably wouldn't bother seeing it again. That's not the setup Marvel wanted. And the problem doesn't stop there. The other pillars meant to hold up Doomsday aren't in better shape. Thunderbolts? Soft opening, faded within weeks. Captain America, Brave New World, failed to ignite audiences at all. Now Fantastic Four joins the Underperformers Club. That's three major tentpoles, a core team that was supposed to carry Doomsday, all labeled flops by analysts and even large chunks of the fan base. This is a nightmare scenario for Marvel. You don't go into a billion-dollar crossover hoping your stars can redeem themselves. You go in riding the momentum of hits that people loved. Think back to when Avengers first came out in 2012. Every character's solo film before it had been a hit. Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, all left audiences eager to see more. That momentum didn't just make the crossover exciting, it made it feel inevitable. Now, the momentum is reversed. Instead of building hype, each new release is a warning sign. Fans are already skeptical before the big movie even hits. That's not anticipation, that's damage control territory. Industry whispers have already started. Do we delay Doomsday? If your lead-up films are underperforming, pushing ahead without fixing the problem could sink the Avengers brand itself. Because here's the danger nobody at Marvel wants to say out loud. What happens if Spider-Man outperforms Avengers? Doomsday? What happens if the crossover, the crown jewel of the MCU, makes less than a solo Spider-Man film? It's not just embarrassing, it would signal that the hierarchy of the MCU has officially flipped, and that the Avengers brand, the thing that used to guarantee a box office storm, no longer carries the weight it used to. That's the shadow hanging over Doomsday right now, and Marvel knows it, which is why, behind the scenes, the panic button has already been pressed. When a studio smells trouble, you can tell by what they start doing behind the curtain. And with Marvel, the signs are everywhere. First, there are the rumors, the kind Marvel will never confirm, but industry insiders keep talking about. Whispers that they've quietly reached out to Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and Scarlett Johansson about coming back, even if it means breaking continuity, rewriting history, or just flat out ignoring previous endings. Think about that for a second. Marvel spent years telling audiences, this is the end of an era, these characters' stories are complete, and now they're allegedly trying to bring them back because they're some of the last guaranteed box office draws the studio has left. Then there's the nostalgia risk. We've already seen them lean into multiverse cameos, surprise returns, and meta references to older Marvel films. But the latest buzz? Pairing Tom Holland's Spider-Man with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine for a mega crossover. The logic is simple. These two characters could rival Endgame ticket sales on name recognition alone. It's a big swing, but here's the problem. It's reactive. None of these moves address the deeper issue that Marvel's storytelling has lost the urgency and unpredictability that once made the MCU must-see. Instead of fixing the core problem, Marvel seems to be throwing every possible sure thing at the wall and hoping one sticks. Big crossovers, legacy character returns, budget cuts on untested heroes, heavier focus on marketable names over fresh ideas. And yes, in the short term, that might prop up Doomsday enough to avoid disaster, but in the long term, it risks turning the MCU into exactly what critics accuse it of being, a machine running on spectacle instead of story. You can see the shift in their playbook already. Sudden rewrites, shuffled release dates, and those ever-convenient creative differences announcements that always seem to drop after bad box office news. According to multiple reports, Fantastic Four's stumble has already triggered internal reviews of every upcoming project tied to Avengers Doomsday, not just for quality, but for audience value. Translation: if a character can't draw a crowd, their role might be cut entirely. For a franchise that used to treat its release schedule like gospel, that's unprecedented. It's the kind of move you make when you're not just worried about one movie, you're worried about the entire plan falling apart. And while Marvel's next steps might save them in the short term, it's clear they're now operating in survival mode, a position this studio hasn't been in for over a decade. The question now isn't just whether Doomsday will succeed, it's whether Marvel can survive the path they're taking to get there. Every franchise hits a crossroads eventually. For Marvel, this one came faster than anyone expected. For over a decade, the formula was unshakable. Tease the next big event. Make every solo film feel like an essential puzzle piece. Keep the momentum rolling so no one dares skip a single chapter. It worked brilliantly for years, but formulas have a shelf life, and the warning signs aren't subtle anymore. The current MCU isn't just dealing with one or two underperforming films. We're looking at 4 major projects in a row: Thunderbolts, Captain America, Brave New World, Fantastic Four, and even parts of the Disney Plus slate, all failing to generate the kind of hype or returns the brand used to take for granted. That's not bad luck, that's a pattern. And here's the danger with patterns. Once fans and the industry see them, it's almost impossible to unsee them. Each stumble feels bigger, every misstep harder to recover from. Suddenly, the MCU isn't the unstoppable machine. It's a brand fighting to remind people why they cared in the first place. So here's the fork in the road. Option 1. Double down on nostalgia. Bring back the icons. Stuff the movies with cameos. Lean on multiverse gimmicks. Give audiences familiar faces and big moments they can't resist posting on social media. Short term, this can work. It'll spike ticket sales, get headlines, and maybe even buy Marvel another year or two of breathing room. Option 2. Rebuild the foundation. Focus on tighter storytelling, riskier creative choices, and characters audiences want to follow for the next decade. Stop chasing spectacle for its own sake and start creating cultural moments people can't afford to miss. The kind that built the MCU in the first place. The first path is tempting. It's safe, it's immediate, but it's also the path of a franchise living on borrowed time. The second path? Much harder, riskier. It means admitting that the current strategy isn't working, scrapping parts of the grand plan, and putting the story first again. Even if that means fewer movies, smaller budgets, or delayed timelines. Right now, it's unclear which road Marvel will choose, but here's what's certain. Avengers Doomsday will be the test. If it delivers just enough to let Marvel convince itself nothing's wrong, the deeper problems will keep growing. And if it flops outright, the shockwaves won't just hit Marvel. They'll hit the entire superhero movie industry. Because the truth is, Marvel's reign wasn't built on CGI or celebrity cameos. It was built on momentum. That feeling that every movie was a step towards something bigger, something you had to see. And once that momentum is gone, you can't just buy it back. Which brings us back to Fantastic Four. This wasn't just a box office disappointment. It was a signal flare, a warning that the formula isn't guaranteed to work anymore. The question is, will Marvel see it for what it is? Or write it off as just another bad weekend? If there's one lesson Fantastic Four First Steps leaves behind, it's this: even the mightiest brands can lose their way. Once upon a time, Marvel could sell out theaters with nothing more than a logo on a black screen. They didn't need to beg for attention because audiences were already lined up around the block. Every ending teased the next big thing, and you couldn't wait to see it. Now, the hype has to be manufactured, bought, and blasted into your feed at all hours because Marvel knows the automatic trust isn't there anymore. That's the real danger. Not that Avengers Doomsday will flop, because it probably won't. The danger is that it will will do just well enough for Marvel to keep telling itself the system is fine, that the cracks in the foundation aren't big enough to matter. But the cracks are there. You can see them in the box office charts, in the lukewarm fan reactions, in the empty Thursday night screenings. You can hear them in the way people talk about the MCU now, not as a must-see event, but as something they might get around to when it hits streaming. Marvel's future isn't going to be decided by one movie. It's going to be decided by whether they're willing to admit that the thing that made them great isn't the same thing keeping them alive today. And maybe that's the hardest truth for a giant like Marvel to accept. That spectacle alone doesn't guarantee connection. That the fans who built this empire in the first place are the same ones who can walk away from it. For now, the studio seems determined to throw every possible sure thing into the mix. Nostalgia, legacy characters, crossovers, budget cuts, surprise announcements. Some of it might work, some of it might not. But if the core story doesn't grab people the way it used to, none of it will matter. Because hype is easy. Holding an audience, that's the hard part. And if Marvel can't figure out how to do that again, Fantastic Four won't be remembered as the movie that kicked off the next great era of the MCU. It'll be remembered as the first sign that the era was already ending.